On our 7th anniversary, Damon, the Don of the Voss family, turned what should have been our wedding into a divorce ceremony for the 7th time. I did not scream or break down sobbing. I only stood in the middle of the hall like a clown while his friends laughed at me. Evelyn, why aren't you laughing? Don't tell us you're actually mad. Damon came over with a frown and gently wiped the tears from my face. Evelyn, stop crying. I promise. This is the last time I'll make a joke like this. I looked at him and suddenly remembered what I had overheard outside his study the night before. Don, this is the 7th time you've made a fool of Evelyn. Aren't you afraid she'll leave? Damon was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. She won't. Everyone knows Evelyn can't live without me. Celine once took a bullet for me. Her health has been poor ever since. She wanted to see Evelyn fooled 7 times. I'm only granting her one last wish. After this, I'll marry Evelyn properly and make her my Donna. I'll give her the grandest wedding as compensation. I had already been humiliated 7 times. No matter how deeply I had loved him, no heart could survive being worn down like that. Damon did not know I was the hidden heir of the Hale family. I had never cared about his title as Don. In 3 days, I would return to my family and accept the marriage alliance. I looked up at him. The 7th divorce ceremony, right? Go on. Go on? Damon's careless smile froze, then slowly faded. Evelyn, are you serious? My gaze moved past him to the words glowing on the stage. Let's get divorced. 7 years. So many times, I had imagined him standing in a chapel and telling the world I was his wife. But in the end, what I got was not a wedding. It was 7 ridiculous divorce ceremonies. The first time, he had the screen flash those same words halfway through our vows. Let's get divorced. I cried so hard I could not speak. He held me for a long time, telling me it was only a joke, telling me it would never happen again. Then came the 2nd time. The 3rd. And now this. Every time, he promised it would be the last. Every time, Celine said she wanted to watch, and I became the price Damon paid for what he owed her. Suddenly, it all felt pointless. Yes, I said. I'm serious. We'll finish the ceremony, just like you wanted. Damon's expression darkened completely. After a few seconds, he smiled coldly. Fine. Then let's finish it. The people who had been enjoying the spectacle slowly went quiet. Someone muttered. Did they really take it too far? She was fine the last few times. Another woman gave an ugly little laugh. Where could she go? Everyone knows she's been with Damon for years and can't even say where her family is. Without Damon, what does she think she is? I lifted my eyes to her. She fell silent at once. That was when Celine stepped forward, her eyes reddened right on cue. Evelyn, don't be angry. I'm sorry, What are you apologizing for? Damon cut her off, anger in his voice, and pulled her behind him. I looked at him. He stood in front of Celine as if I were the one bullying everyone. What are you waiting for? He said coldly. Continue. The host went up to the stage with a stiff face. Miss Evelyn, do you willingly end your relationship with Mr. Damon and from this day forward go your separate ways, without regret or entanglement? The place was absurd. The setup was ridiculous. Even the vows sounded like a joke. Something pressed hard against my chest. A sudden wave of nausea rose into my throat. I pressed my lips together and forced it down, thinking it was only the humiliation turning my stomach. Still, I said. I do. The second the words left my mouth, Damon swept the champagne tower off the table. Glass shattered across the floor. His expression darkened. Evelyn, you've gone too far. I suddenly felt exhausted. Wasn't this what you arranged? I only followed the script. How is that going too far? For once, he had nothing to say. In the end, he took Celine by the hand and walked away. When I stepped out of the hall, rain was pouring. A black car stopped at the foot of the steps. Celine sat in the back seat, looking apologetic. Evelyn, why don't you come with us? I looked past her. Damon did not even lift his head. His voice was cold. Drive. The tires rolled through a puddle, splashing icy, muddy water across my wedding dress. A hotel attendant brought me an umbrella and quietly asked whether I needed a car. I nodded. On the way back to the estate, I texted my father first. Father, I've decided to come home. I'll return to the Hale family in 3 days. His reply came almost immediately. That's wonderful, Evelyn. You finally made up your mind. I'll have everything ready for you. I turned off the screen. This time, I would not wait for Damon to turn back. When I returned to the estate, drenched from head to toe, every light in the house was on. Drink some warm water. He sat down beside me, concern written all over his face. It might have meant something if Celine had not been sitting there too. I took the cup and almost laughed. Celine had Damon's coat over her shoulders, her face pale. She said softly. Damon, can I stay here tonight? I'm a little scared. Damon looked at me. Almost without thinking, he stepped in front of her, already waiting for me to make a scene. The old Evelyn would have. She would have demanded an explanation. This time, I only paused for a second. Sure. Stay as long as you want. Damon's frown deepened. I did not look at either of them again. I changed my shoes and went straight to the master bathroom. Hot water ran over me, but I still felt cold to the bone. It was not the first time something like this had happened. The day Celine returned to New York, Damon brought her back to the estate. She was drunk, leaning against him, her fingers still hooked around his tie. I stood at the top of the stairs and watched him carry her into the master bedroom. That's our room. I had been so angry I laughed. You're letting her sleep there? Does that seem appropriate to you? Damon did not even stop walking. He placed Celine on the bed, then went to the bathroom for a warm towel. Evelyn, watch your tone. Celine damaged her health because of me. She just came back to New York. I'm the only person she has. Don't make an issue out of this. I stood in the doorway and watched him lower his head to wipe her face. Once, I came back from a job covered in blood. Damon had pulled me into his arms without hesitation, kissed my stained cheek, then carried me to the bathroom and washed every trace of blood from my skin himself. For years, I had believed that tenderness belonged only to me. Now he was giving that same tenderness to someone else. A knock on the bathroom door pulled me back. Evelyn. Damon's voice came through the wood. Come out. We need to talk. I did not answer. When I finished showering, he was still waiting outside, a hair dryer in his hand. Sit. I'll dry your hair. I was too tired to push him away. Warm air moved through my hair. His fingers threaded through it, gentler than usual. Let today pass, he said. After the wedding, I'll make it up to you. I looked at him in the mirror. I first met Damon in an underground bar. At 16, I had walked away when the elders of the Hale family began discussing my marriage. I wanted to know who I was without the Hale name, and whether anyone could love Evelyn without wanting something from her family. So I refused the family's money, buried my surname, and went to New York alone. I had only meant to stay away for a while. By the time I met Damon, I was working in one of the roughest parts of the city. Four drunk men blocked my way and tried to force me into a private room. I drove my elbow into one man's ribs and kicked another in the knee, but a third caught me from behind before I could reach the exit. The fourth twisted a fist into my hair and dragged me toward the door. Just before the door closed, Damon appeared. He kicked those men to the ground, then turned to me. Are you all right? Do you need me to take you to a hospital? Too stubborn to admit how much it hurt, I shook my head. A faint smile touched his lips. Most girls your age would have frozen. You fought back. That was brave. From that moment on, I was gone. Later, I stayed by his side and told him only that my parents lived far away, that I was alone, that I had nowhere else to go. Damon believed me. When my father finally offered to bring me home, I chose Damon instead. He always thought I could not leave him. He never knew the Hale family had been waiting for me to come home all these years. The dryer stopped. Damon looked at me through the mirror. Why aren't you saying anything? I met his eyes in the mirror. Damon, what would you do if I left? His hand went still. For the first time that night, panic broke through his composure. Evelyn, The door opened before he could finish. Celine stood there with red eyes. Damon, I can't sleep. Can you stay with me? Damon looked torn, but his gaze kept drifting back to her. I stood and pulled the door open wider. Go. The room fell silent. He opened his mouth as if he still wanted to answer me. In the end, he said nothing and walked out with Celine. He never answered my question. He did not need to. He did not come back that night. Sometime after midnight, thirst drove me downstairs for water. As I passed the curved staircase, Celine called my name from behind. Evelyn. She stood with one hand on the railing, her eyes already red. I only want us to get along. Please don't hate me just because Damon stayed with me. I did not want to hear it. I turned toward the stairs. Celine hurried after me and caught my wrist. Just let me explain. I pulled free. Don't touch me. The next second, she threw herself backward. But before she fell, her fingers locked around my wrist and dragged me with her. My abdomen struck the corner of the landing. Pain exploded through me. Celine's scream woke the entire estate. Damon reached us first. The moment he saw me crumpled at the bottom of the stairs, his expression changed. He started toward me without thinking. Evelyn. Before he reached me, Celine clutched her leg and sobbed. Damon, my leg hurts. Evelyn probably didn't mean to push me. Please don't blame her. My chest hurts too. She pressed a hand to the left side of her chest. It was the exact spot where the bullet she had taken for Damon had left its scar. Damon stopped. His gaze moved between my bloodless face and Celine's shaking body. In the end, he turned and lifted her into his arms. Call a doctor, he ordered the housekeeper. But he did not look at me again. I curled on the cold floor, in so much pain that every breath made me shake. Then blood began spreading beneath my dress. The servants rushed me to the hospital. Before I lost consciousness, all I could see was Damon carrying Celine away. He had taken one step toward me. In the end, he still chose her. When I woke again, all I saw was white. The smell of disinfectant filled my nose. The moment the nurse saw I was awake, she called the doctor. My throat was dry. What happened to me? The doctor spoke carefully, his voice gentle. Miss Evelyn, you were pregnant. I froze. For a moment, I could not even understand the words. He paused. But the baby didn't survive. Everything went quiet. I stared at him, rigid. What baby? Pity flickered in the doctor's eyes. An early miscarriage. The main trigger was a hard impact to the abdomen, followed by fever from being caught in the rain and severe emotional distress. By the time you were brought in, it was already too late. I looked down at my stomach. It was flat. Empty. But the doctor was telling me there had once been a child there. I had not even known. And it was already gone. The moment on the staircase came back with terrible clarity. Celine's fingers clamping around my wrist before she fell. The pain when my abdomen struck the landing. Damon lifting Celine into his arms without turning back. And his words. Evelyn, are you done making a scene? My fingers slowly tightened around the bedsheet. It felt as if a dull knife had opened my chest. But I could not cry. The tears would not come. They only lodged somewhere deep inside me and hurt. The doctor asked quietly. Would you like us to notify your family? If this involved an assault, you can also report it. I was silent for such a long time that the nurse seemed to think I had not heard. Then I asked hoarsely. Does Damon know? The doctor shook his head. The servants who brought you in only said you fell down the stairs. We haven't notified him yet. I closed my eyes. My thoughts were a mess. I was still reeling from the loss of the baby. I had no idea how to face Damon, much less tell him we had ever had a child. Don't tell him. My voice came out soft and cold. For the official record, just say I fainted from a fever after falling in the rain. The doctor hesitated. I looked at him. Please. In the end, he sighed and nodded before leaving. When the room became quiet again, I laid my hand over my lower abdomen. Nothing answered. I suddenly remembered a night long ago when Damon was drunk and held me in his arms. He said that once he secured his seat as Dawn, we would have our own child. He would teach the child to ride. He would teach the child to shoot. For 7 years, I had imagined what it would be like to carry his child. I imagined Damon resting a hand over my stomach, waiting awkwardly for the first kick. I imagined him overseeing the nursery himself, checking even the cradle twice. I imagined our child cherished in our arms, the most precious thing in the entire Voss family. But now the baby was gone before I had even been given the chance to love it. I buried my face in the pillow and finally broke down. The pillow muffled my sobs until I could barely breathe. I pressed both hands over my empty abdomen, but there was nothing left for me to hold on to. My phone lit up beside my pillow. It was a message from my father. The plane is arranged for noon the day after tomorrow. Evelyn, come home. The man I've chosen for the alliance is already waiting for you. He is steady and responsible. I think you'll like him. Once you come home, don't keep hurting yourself over an outsider. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I typed slowly. All right. I'll be there on time. It was evening by the time Damon arrived at the hospital. Evelyn. He came quickly to the bedside. For once, he looked panicked. My assistant said you were brought to the hospital. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at him and said nothing. He reached out to touch my forehead. I turned my head away. Damon's fingers stiffened. Celine followed him in soon after. Her wrist was bandaged, her face pale. Evelyn, are you all right? I really didn't know you'd fall that badly. She paused, and her eyes reddened again. If I'd known you would shove me away, I never would have followed you onto the stairs. Damon's brow tightened slightly. Celine sprained her wrist. The doctor said she shouldn't be upset again. I looked down at the 4-needle in my hand and almost laughed. Even now. Even here. He was still explaining for her. Damon softened his voice. When you're discharged, we'll have the real wedding. The day after tomorrow, all right? I did not answer. As if he was afraid to hear me refuse, he tucked the blanket around me and left with Celine. The moment the door closed, I slowly tightened my grip on the blanket. Damon did not know that we had just lost our child. It did not matter. Once I was gone, he would know everything. The next day, Damon seemed to be truly trying to make it up to me. He had the wedding schedule sent over again and removed every last trace of the old prank setup. This time, it's real. He stood at the study door, his voice low. Evelyn, don't be angry anymore. I looked up at him. If not for the miscarriage report I had hidden away. If not for the child no one had ever known about. I might have believed him. Damon's phone rang soon after. He went out to the balcony to answer it. When the glass door closed, only Celine and I remained in the room. She set down her teacup, and the softness on her face vanished. You're still not leaving? I looked at her. She laughed. Honestly, I've never seen anyone put up with as much as you. 7 times. All I had to do was say one word, and Damon turned a wedding into a divorce ceremony. How are you still here? My fingers tightened slightly around the cup. And what are you? No matter how much Damon protects you, I'm still the one standing beside him. Who do you think you are, coming here to flaunt yourself in front of me? Celine raised her brows, as if I had said something very funny. She glanced at Damon, whose back was turned to us on the balcony, then leaned closer. What am I? Evelyn, you don't really think you win just because he gives you a wedding, do you? My expression went still. What do you mean? Celine's voice was light. After the wedding, Damon is giving me the Northport line. And part of the Voss family's voting rights. He said he owes me. I froze. Northport was one of Damon's most important routes. It was a line I had spent 3 years helping him wrestle away from several old families. It was also the foundation he had once said would belong to us after we married. Now he was going to hand it to Celine as compensation. I thought of the child I had never even known. I thought of the doctor saying, in that grave voice, a hard impact to the abdomen. I thought of Damon lifting Celine into his arms without even looking at me. So it was not only my dignity. Even 7 years of my work had become something he could spend to repay her. Celine was still smiling. That night, I fell on purpose. But would you dare say it? Would Damon believe you? To him, you were just jealous of me and pushed me on purpose. I looked at her. The hatred inside me slowly cooled into something harder. If this had been before, I would have lunged forward and torn that smile off her face. Now, I only asked calmly. Are you done? Celine's expression froze. I set down the cup. If you are, get away from me. Her expression shifted, and she was about to speak when the balcony door opened. Damon came in, immediately noticing the tension between us. What happened? Celine's eyes reddened in an instant. Nothing. I only wanted to talk to Evelyn properly, but it seems she just doesn't like me. Damon looked at me. That same warning was still in his eyes. All at once, even explaining felt pointless. I'm tired. I stood and went back to my room. Behind me, Damon seemed to want to follow. Then Celine called softly. Damon, I feel a little dizzy. His footsteps stopped, exactly as I knew they would. I did not turn back. The following morning, the wedding dress was wheeled into the master bedroom. Damon stood at the door, his voice unusually gentle. I brought the dress for you to see first. It's heavy, so you'll change at the venue. I'll go ahead and wait for you there. I turned my face aside, avoiding his hand. I don't feel well. You go first. He hesitated, but eventually nodded. All right. It starts at noon. I'll wait for you. I watched him leave, almost smiling. I tore up every photograph of us in the house and scattered the pieces everywhere. Thinking of the gift I had prepared for him at the wedding venue, I almost smiled. After I was done, I pulled the SIM card from my phone and threw my ring onto the floor. Then I placed the farewell letter I had written on top of the miscarriage report. I took one last look at the estate and left without turning back. Meanwhile, in the wedding hall, unease settled deep in Damon's chest. He checked the time. 11:50. He turned to his assistant. Go see if Evelyn has arrived. The assistant left at once. Less than 2 minutes later, he rushed back in, his face white. He had run so fast that even his voice was shaking. Dawn, something happened. Damon's heart dropped. For a second, everything around him went quiet. Say it clearly. The assistant trembled under his gaze. Dawn, you may want to see the bridal lounge for yourself. Damon looked afraid for the first time. The calm he had worn for years finally cracked. He rushed out, no longer caring about composure, and shoved the door open with a shaking hand. The lounge was empty. No Evelyn. Only the ruined wedding dress remained. Pieces of torn photographs lay scattered across the floor. A farewell letter sat on the table. Beneath the letter was a hospital report. Damon's gaze fell on it. The next second, his breathing stopped. The silence in the bridal lounge was suffocating. Damon stood frozen, the heavy paper of the medical report rattling slightly between his fingers. The words on the page were stark, typed in cold, sterile. Black ink, yet they burned into his retinas. Patient, Evelyn. Diagnosis, early stage miscarriage. Primary cause, severe abdominal trauma, complicated by exposure and acute emotional distress. A physical tremor started in his hands and traveled up his arms. He read the lines again, and then a third time, waiting for the words to scramble, for his mind to tell him this was another one of Celine's elaborate pranks, or perhaps a cruel joke Evelyn was playing to get back at him. But Evelyn did not play jokes. He was the one who did. Don, his assistant, Leo, whispered from the doorway, his face pale as paper. The guests are waiting in the main hall. The priest is asking if we should get out, Damon whispered. His voice was barely a rasp, stripped of the commanding authority that usually made the entire Voss syndicate fall into line. But Dawn, Miss Celine is also asking. I said, get out. Damon roared, slamming his fist into the vanity table. The glass mirror cracked, a spiderweb of fractures blooming outward, distorting his own terrified reflection. Leo scrambled backward, shutting the door behind him with a soft click. Left alone in the quiet of the lounge, Damon sank onto the plush stool, his knees suddenly unable to support his weight. He picked up the envelope containing the farewell letter. The handwriting was neat, elegant, and instantly recognizable. Evelyn had spent years managing the ledgers of his underground ports. He had seen this handwriting thousands of times. But it had never looked like this, so final, so cold. Damon. You wanted 7 divorce ceremonies, and you got them. This is the last one. There will be no 8th wedding, because there is no longer an Evelyn to stand by your side. The child we lost was the final thread holding me to you. You chose to carry Celine away while I lay bleeding on the floor. I do not hate you for it, I only pity myself for taking 7 years to realize that you never deserved a single day of my devotion. Do not look for me. The Evelyn you knew died on the cold tiles of your staircase. Have a good life with your debts and your guilt. Evelyn. No, Damon muttered, his voice cracking. No, no, no. The memories rushed back like a tidal wave, drowning him. He remembered the rain outside the hotel, the muddy water splashing onto her pristine white dress. He remembered the way she had looked at him, not with anger, not with tears, but with a quiet, hollow emptiness that should have terrified him then. He remembered her asking him in the mirror, Damon, what would you do if I left? And he had walked away to tend to Celine's sprained wrist. Dawn. The door was thrown open again. Celine stood there, wearing a pale blue silk dress, her wrist neatly bandaged. She looked around the messy room, her eyes lingering on the torn photographs on the floor before landing on Damon's trembling figure. Damon, what's taking so long? The media is outside, and everyone is saying Evelyn ran away. Honestly, she's being so dramatic again. It was just a joke. Damon stood up. The sheer aura of violence radiating from him made Celine choke on her words. She took a step back, her feigned fragility instantly morphing into genuine fear. Damon, you're scaring me. What happened on the stairs, Celine? Damon's voice was dangerously quiet, like the calm before a storm that would tear a city apart. I told you, she pushed me. The truth, Damon growled, lunging forward and grabbing her by the arms. His grip was so tight her face contorted in pain. The doctor said she suffered severe abdominal trauma. She was pregnant, Celine. She was carrying my child. And she fell down those stairs. How did she fall? Celine's eyes widened. For a fraction of a second, sheer panic flickered in her expression before she forced tears to well up. I don't know. She pulled me. Damon. You have to believe me, why would I hurt her? I took a bullet for you. Remember? My health. Shut up about the bullet. Damon screamed, the sound echoing off the cracked mirror. For 7 years, you've used that scar to strip Evelyn of everything. My time, my attention, her dignity. And I let you do it because I thought I owed you. But she was bleeding. She was bleeding on the floor, and you told me your leg hurt. He let go of her so abruptly she stumbled back against the wall, sobbing. Dawn, Leo called out nervously, stepping back into the room. The hospital. We called the doctor who treated Miss Evelyn. He said Miss Evelyn explicitly ordered them not to tell you about the miscarriage. She said she didn't want you to have any more excuses to touch her. The words felt like a physical blow to Damon's chest. He staggered back, clutching the edge of the vanity. She didn't want him to have any excuses. She didn't even want his grief. Find her, Damon whispered, his eyes bloodshot, staring at the ruined wedding dress on the floor. Call every port, every airport, every highway toll. I don't care if you have to tear New York apart block by block. Find my wife. At the private airfield on the outskirts of New York, the rain had finally stopped, leaving behind a crisp, cool breeze. A sleek, unmarked Gulfstream jet sat on the tarmac, its engines humming softly. Standing near the boarding stairs was a tall man in a tailored charcoal suit, his graying hair combed back neatly. This was Julian Hale, the patriarch of the Hale family, a dynasty whose influence ran so deep in the shipping, banking, and political sectors that even the strongest mafia syndicates, including the Voss family, were mere ants in comparison. Beside him stood a younger man with sharp, aristocratic features and calm, calculating eyes. This was Sean Vance, the heir to the Vance empire, a man who had waited years for this day. A black Bentley rolled to a stop near the tarmac. The door opened, and Evelyn stepped out. She had changed out of her damp clothes into a simple, elegant beige trench coat and trousers. Her face was pale, devoid of makeup, but her eyes, once filled with the weary, anxious love of a woman trying to please an ungrateful man, were now quiet and cold. Evelyn, Julian Hale breathed, his voice cracking with emotion as he stepped forward. He reached out, his hands shaking as he took his daughter's cold fingers. My girl. You're finally home. Evelyn looked at her father. The man who could crush empires with a single phone call looked aged, his eyes filled with a deep, aching regret. Father, she said softly, letting him pull her into a firm, protective embrace. I'm sorry I kept you waiting so long. Don't say that, Julian whispered, stroking her hair. You're back now. That's all that matters. The Hale family is yours. Nobody will ever dare humiliate you again. Over her father's shoulder, Evelyn's gaze met Sean's. Sean gave her a small, respectful nod. There was no pity in his eyes, only a quiet, unwavering strength that she hadn't realized she needed. Evelyn, Sean said, his voice deep and reassuring. It's good to see you again. Thank you for coming, Sean, she replied, stepping back from her father. I know this marriage alliance is sudden, and It is not sudden to me, Sean interrupted gently, a faint, rare smile touching his lips. I've waited 7 years for you to realize that New York was too small for you. I can wait a little longer for you to get used to me. Evelyn felt a strange, unfamiliar warmth touch her chest, though her heart still felt like a hollow cavern. She looked back at the skyline of New York in the distance. For 7 years, she had lived in the shadows, hiding her name, pretending to be an orphan with nowhere to go, just so Damon would love her for who she was. She had let his friends laugh at her, let his subordinates look down on her, and let Celine trample over her dignity, all for a dream that had turned out to be a nightmare. No more, she thought. Let's go, Evelyn said, turning her back on the city. There's nothing left for me here. As she boarded the plane, she pulled her old phone out of her pocket, took out the SIM card, and dropped it into a cup of cold coffee. She would never use that number again. The girl named Evelyn who loved Damon Voss was dead. The crown princess of the Hale family had returned. 3 days passed, but for Damon, time had ceased to exist. He hadn't slept, he hadn't shaved, and the pristine Dawn of the Voss family now looked like a ghost haunting his own empty estate. Dawn, Leo reported, his head bowed low as he stood in the middle of the study. The floor was littered with empty whiskey bottles. We've searched every hotel, every train station, and every flight manifest. There is no record of an Evelyn leaving the city under her name. Her phone has been completely deactivated. It's as if she vanished into thin air. She couldn't have just vanished. Damon slammed his glass onto the desk, amber liquid spilling over his hands. She has no money. She has no family. She told me she was alone in the world. Perhaps she had help? Leo suggested hesitantly. Damon's jaw tightened. Help from whom? She spent every day of the last 7 years in this house or at the docks managing our routes. She didn't have friends. Because I didn't want her associating with outsiders. Who would help her? Before Leo could answer, the door to the study was pushed open. Celine walked in, her face pale, her bandaged wrist held close to her chest. Damon, the elders of the Voss family are downstairs. They're furious. They say the Northport route has been completely frozen. The shipping authorities are refusing to clear our cargo, and 3 of our main distribution warehouses were raided by federal agents this morning. Damon didn't even look at her. Tell them I'll handle it. How can you handle it when you're locked in here drinking? Celine raised her voice, frustration breaking through her fragile facade. Damon, you have to look at me. I'm the one who's still here. Evelyn left you. She didn't care about your family, she didn't care about your business. Get out, Damon said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Damon. I said, get out, Celine. Damon stood up, his eyes wild and bloodshot. Do you think I don't know what you did? I spoke to the housekeeper. She saw you grab Evelyn's wrist on the stairs. She saw you pull her down with you. Celine froze, her face draining of what little color it had left. She's lying. She's always liked Evelyn more. The housekeeper has worked for my family since before I was born, Damon snarled, stepping around the desk until he was towering over her. She has no reason to lie. You dragged my pregnant wife down those stairs because you couldn't stand the thought of her actually marrying me. You killed my child. It was an accident. Celine shrieked, tears spilling over I didn't know she was pregnant. Damon, please. I took a bullet for you. You promised you'd take care of me forever. And I have, Damon said, his voice suddenly turning dead and empty. I gave you villas. I gave you money. I turned my own wedding into a joke 7 times just to make you smile. But today, it ends. He turned to Leo. Take her out of this house. Strip her of the Northport route. Take back the keys to the apartments, the cars, and the accounts. From this day forward, if she enters Voss territory, treat her as an enemy. Celine's eyes widened in sheer horror. Damon. You can't do this to me. Damon. I saved your life. She screamed and struggled as 2 large guards dragged her out of the study, her polished nails scratching uselessly against the hardwood floor. Damon sank back into his chair, covering his face with his hands. The house was quiet now. Utterly, terribly quiet. For 7 years, Evelyn had filled this silence with her soft voice, her warm meals, and her gentle smiles. Now, there was nothing left but the smell of stale whiskey and the cold weight of his own sins. Dawn, Leo whispered, checking his tablet. We just received an invitation. It's from the Hale family. They are hosting a grand banquet tonight at the Plaza Hotel to celebrate the return of their long-lost heir and her upcoming engagement to Sean Vance. Damon frowned, rubbing his temples. The Hale family? They rarely get involved in New York affairs. Why are they inviting us? The invitation was sent to all major families in the tri-state area, Leo explained. But more importantly, the Hales are the ones who control the deep water permits for the Northport. If we want our cargo cleared, we need their approval. This banquet might be our only chance to speak with the head of the family. Damon closed his eyes, his chest aching. He didn't care about the Northport. He didn't care about the Voss Empire. But he knew that if he let the family business collapse, he would have even fewer resources to find Evelyn. Prepare the suit, Damon said, his voice hollow. We're going. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of glittering crystal, chandeliers, expensive champagne, and the whispers of New York's elite. Damon stood near the edge of the ballroom, a glass of untouched scotch in his hand. He wore a flawless black tuxedo, but his pale complexion and the dark circles under his eyes spoke of his inner ruin. Several heads of smaller families tried to approach him, but the cold, uninviting aura radiating from the Voss dawn kept them at bay. Have you heard? A woman nearby whispered to her companion. The Hale family's hidden heir, they say she was living in obscurity for years. Nobody knew where she was until the patriarch himself brought her back. And she's marrying Sean Vance, the other replied, sighing. The Vance and Hale alliance, they'll completely dominate the eastern seaboard. Even the mafia won't dare whisper in their presence. Damon paid little attention to the gossip. His eyes constantly swept the crowd, desperately hoping, praying to see a familiar figure. Where are you, Evelyn? His heart cried out. Are you cold? Are you safe? Do you hate me so much that you won't even let me find you? Suddenly, the massive double doors of the ballroom swung open. The chatter in the room instantly died down. The orchestra stopped playing, transitioning into a soft, majestic classical piece. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice echoed through the high-ceilinged room. Representing the Hale family, the patriarch, Mr. Julian Hale, accompanied by the crown princess of the Hale family, Miss Evelyn Hale, and her fiancé, Mr. Sean Vance. Damon's breath caught in his throat. Evelyn. He turned his head slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Walking down the grand marble staircase, flanked by her father and Sean Vance, was the woman he had spent the last 3 days losing his mind over. But this was not the Evelyn he knew. She was dressed in a breathtaking, custom-tailored emerald silk gown that clung elegantly to her figure, her dark hair styled in a sophisticated updo that revealed the sharp, delicate line of her jaw. Around her neck was a necklace of flawless diamonds that caught the light with every step she took. There was no warmth in her face, no anxious desire to please, no trace of the quiet girl who used to wait up for him with a warm bowl of soup. She walked with her head held high, her gaze cool, regal, and entirely detached from the crowd of admirers gasping at her beauty. Beside her, Sean Vance kept a protective hand on her waist, his eyes scanning the room with a calm, possessive authority. Damon's glass slipped from his fingers. The crystal shattered against the polished floor, the scotch pooling around his expensive leather shoes. Several guests turned to look at him in surprise, but Damon didn't notice. His eyes were locked on Evelyn. Evelyn. He whispered, his voice trembling so hard it was barely audible. She was the hidden heir of the Hale family. The woman who had slept on a cheap sofa in his dusty apartment when they first Met, the woman who had managed his books and cooked his meals, was the most powerful heiress in the country. And he had humiliated her 7 times. He had let his friends call her a homeless stray who couldn't survive without him. Evelyn's gaze swept across the ballroom, polite but distant. For a brief, agonizing second, her eyes landed on Damon. Damon's heart stopped. He took a step forward, his hands reaching out. Instinctively. Evelyn. But her eyes didn't linger. Her gaze passed over him as if he were nothing more than a stranger, a minor detail in a crowded room. She turned to Sean Vance, a soft, genuine smile touching her lips as he whispered something in her ear. The pain that sliced through Damon's chest was so intense he had to grab the edge of a nearby table to keep from collapsing. As the banquet transitioned into a formal reception, the guests began to mingle. Damon pushed through the crowd, ignoring the whispers and the warnings from Leo, who was desperately trying to hold him back. Don, please, this is the Hale family's territory. If you cause a scene here, get out of my way, Leo, Damon growled, his eyes locked on the VIP lounge at the far end of the ballroom, where Evelyn was currently speaking with a group of international bankers. He didn't care about the consequences. He didn't care if the Hales ruined his family overnight. He only knew that if he didn't speak to her now, he would lose her forever. As Evelyn excused herself from the bankers and walked toward a quiet balcony to get some fresh air, Damon seized the opportunity. He slipped past the security guards, his mafia training making his movements swift and silent, and stepped onto the balcony, closing the glass doors behind him. Evelyn, he breathed. Evelyn stopped, her back to him. She didn't flinch, nor did she look surprised. She slowly turned around, her emerald gown catching the moonlight, her expression as calm as a frozen lake. Mr. Voss, she said, her voice smooth and devoid of any emotion. This is a private balcony. I believe the main hall is that way. Mr. Voss. The formal address felt like a physical blow. Evelyn, please, Damon said, stepping closer, his hands shaking. He wanted to reach out and touch her, to pull her into his arms and never let go, but the sheer, icy distance in her eyes kept him frozen in place. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me who you were? Evelyn let out a soft, bitter laugh. Would it have made a difference, Damon? Yes. No. Damon stammered, his composure completely shattered. If I had known. If you had known I was a Hale, you wouldn't have turned our wedding into a divorce ceremony 7 times, Evelyn interrupted quietly, her eyes locking onto his. You wouldn't have let your friends call me a clown. You wouldn't have let Celine trample over my dignity. You would have treated me with respect, wouldn't you? Damon fell silent, his throat tight. But because you thought I was just an orphan with nowhere to go, Evelyn continued, stepping closer to him, her voice dropping to a whisper that cut deeper than any knife. You thought you could treat me however you wanted. You thought my love was a blank check you could cash whenever Celine needed to feel special. Evelyn, I'm sorry, Damon sobbed, tears finally spilling over his cheeks. He fell to his knees before her, his hands grabbing the hem of her emerald gown. Completely ignoring his pride, his title as Don, and the dignity he had spent his life building. I was wrong. I was a fool. I didn't know. I didn't know about the baby. If I had known, I swear to God I would have never left your side. But you didn't know, Evelyn said, her voice remaining steady, though a faint, momentary shadow of pain crossed her eyes at the mention of the child. And that's the point, Damon. Your tenderness is conditional. It depends on what you think people deserve. You thought Celine deserved everything because she took a bullet for you. You thought I deserved nothing because I had already given you my entire life. She looked down at him kneeling at her feet. Once, she would have done anything to see this man show a fraction of this emotion for her. Now, she felt nothing but a cold, heavy emptiness. Please, Evelyn, Damon begged, his voice cracking as he looked up at her, his face wet with tears. Give me one more chance. Just one. I'll destroy the Voss family. I'll give you everything. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Please, don't leave me with Sean Vance. He doesn't love you like I do. Mr. Voss. A deep, calm voice shattered the tension. Sean Vance stepped onto the balcony, his tall figure instantly casting a shadow over Damon. He didn't look angry, his expression was merely one of mild annoyance, as if he had found a stray dog blocking his path. I believe my fiancé asked you to leave, Sean said, stepping in front of Evelyn, completely shielding her from Damon's view. Damon stood up, his tears instantly drying as a primal, defensive anger flared up inside him. She is my wife. We've been together for 7 years. You signed the divorce papers 7 times, Mr. Voss, Sean replied, his voice cool and unyielding. By your own hand, she was never your wife. She was merely the woman you chose to humiliate to please another. Now, she belongs to the Hale family. And soon, she will be my wife. I'll kill you, Damon snarled, his hand reaching toward his inner jacket, where his gun usually sat. But before he could even touch the leather of his holster, 4 red laser dots appeared on his chest. Evelyn's father, Julian Hale, stepped onto the balcony, followed by 6 heavily armed guards. His face was a mask of cold fury. Mr. Voss, Julian said, his voice echoing with the power of a man who could erase the Voss family from existence with a single word. If you touch that weapon, I will ensure that the Voss syndicate is dismantled by dawn, and your body is thrown into the harbor. Leave my daughter alone. Damon looked at Julian, then at the laser dots on his chest, and finally at Evelyn. Evelyn was standing behind Sean, her hand resting gently on Sean's arm. She didn't look at Damon with hatred. She didn't look at him with regret. She looked at him as if he were already a ghost. Let's go, Sean, she said softly, turning her back on him once again. The air out here has turned foul. Sean smiled, placing a protective hand over hers as they walked back into the warm, glittering light of the ballroom. Damon stood on the cold balcony, the wind whipping against his face, his hands trembling as the realization finally, completely settled in. He had had a queen. And he had traded her for a handful of dirt. 6 months later. The decline of the Voss family was swift, silent, and absolute. Once Damon lost the support of the Hale family's shipping routes, his business began to crumble. One by one, the smaller families he had once commanded began to turn on him, sensing his weakness. Damon didn't fight back with his usual ruthlessness. He spent his days in his study, surrounded by the remnants of the life he had destroyed. Celine had tried to return to him once, desperate and broke after being stripped of her assets, but she was turned away at the gates. She eventually left New York, ruined and forgotten by the high society she had tried so hard to dominate. Today was a clear, sunny day in Chicago. Inside the Grand Cathedral of St. Jude, the bells were ringing, their joyful chimes echoing through the streets. The church was filled with the most powerful figures in the country, all dressed in their finest attire. Standing at the altar was Sean Vance, looking exceptionally handsome in a midnight blue tuxedo, a soft, nervous smile playing on his lips as he watched the heavy wooden doors of the cathedral slide open. Evelyn walked down the aisle, her arm looped securely through her father's. She wore a gown of pure white lace, its long train trailing behind her like a cloud. Her face was radiant, her eyes bright and filled with a peace she hadn't known for 7 long years. As Julian Hale handed her hand to Sean, he leaned in and whispered, "Be happy, my girl." "I am, father," Evelyn whispered back. Sean took her hand, his fingers warm and steady, offering her a silent promise of safety, respect, and a love that would never ask her to play the fool. "You look beautiful," Sean murmured. "Thank you," Evelyn smiled, her heart finally feeling whole again. Outside the cathedral, hidden in the shadow of a parked limousine across the street, a man sat in the dark interior, his eyes fixed on the church doors. Damon looked thin, his hair messy, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame. He watched the doors open, watched the guests pour out, throwing flower petals into the air as Evelyn and Sean emerged, hand in hand, laughing under the bright afternoon sun. He saw the way Sean looked at her, with a deep, unwavering respect that Damon had never been strong enough to show. He saw the way Evelyn smiled, a genuine, carefree laugh that he hadn't seen in 7 years. A single tear rolled down Damon's cheek, catching the dim light of the car. He had wanted to make her his Donna. He had promised her the grandest wedding as compensation. But in the end, the grandest wedding of her life was one he was not allowed to attend. "Dawn," the driver whispered softly from the front seat. "Should we leave?" Damon closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the cold leather seat. The image of her smile was burned into his mind, a beautiful, agonizing torture that he would carry for the rest of his days. "Yes," Damon whispered, his voice cracking with the weight of a lifetime of regret. "Drive." The car rolled away, disappearing into the bustling streets of the city, leaving behind the wedding she deserved, and the life he had thrown away.